morning, everybody. It is 8:30, so in the interest of everybody's time, we'll go ahead and get started. Before I introduce James, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping procedures this morning. If everyone can remain on mute when they're not interacting or asking questions, that would be great, so there isn't any background noise. That would be wonderful. Video is optional, but sometimes when we're having a conversation, it's a little easier to be looking at your face. So if you want to go ahead and turn on your cameras, please feel free. There's one button on your screen I would like you all to avoid hitting. It says share screen or present now. Please avoid hitting that, as that will interrupt the presentation. If and when you have questions for James, you may either use your raise hand feature, unmute yourself and jump in, or put the question into the chat and I will prompt James as needed. If there are any technical issues, please put those into the chat as well, and I'll do my best to help you through those. Just be aware that most of the issues stem from your own Wi-Fi connections. If anyone is dialed in via telephone today, please send me an email at mfrey@pjh.com so we can get you your PDR credits for this morning. And finally, we are recording this morning's session. It'll be available on our YouTube channel later this week, should you ever need to refer back to it, or if you would like to share it with some of your coworkers. So with that, I'd like to formally introduce. He currently operates the Shadow Ridge Golf Academy in Omaha, Nebraska, and is recognized by Golf Magazine as a top 100 teacher in America and a Golf Digest top 50 teacher in America. He is a 9-time PJ Section Teacher of the Year and currently instructs 18 PJ Tour, Web.com, and LPGA Tour players who have combined to win over 20 tour events. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. James Sieckmann.
All right. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that. Don't know everybody, but I love to interact with other PGA members and always talk things high performance, because you're always bound to learn something when you're collaborating. So I'd like to share a few things what I think I know about this game, but more importantly, I like to answer questions that you have and interact that way. It's probably going to be more interesting to do so. I always tell my students that confusion has a cost, and it would be the same as a coach. I mean, if you're not 100% certain on the right way to attack certain things, that there's a cost to that. So everybody wants to talk technique, and certainly that's important, but that's not where we should start. We are coaches, not teachers. And we got to view ourselves that way. And there's a lot to consider if you're interested in trying to help your students. And I know you are. And I think one of the mistakes we make is, the coaching paradigm, I think, is broken in golf. In another sport, you'd see your student every day. You give them drills, and we'd work on things. And if they weren't doing it the next day, they'd be running stadium stairs, or they would be, So there's very little accountability in most coaching environments in golf, which is a huge mistake, I think. And so I think the most important thing is to create a culture of high performance in your business. And that takes effort and some planning. And some of you might not know, like, well, how would you do that? What is, a culture of high performance? And I will just briefly tell you that when I was a younger teaching pro, I had an opportunity to speak with Coach Tom Osborne, who's a football coach at the university where I lived. And he talked about creating a culture, and he basically said, listen, if you don't create one, your worst student will create it for you. And you got to think about who your worst student is. He's seen 7 different teachers. He's got on swing B on the 4th hole, and you've given him a beautiful lesson. He's hit one bad shot and he's on to the next thing, or he's thinking you don't know anything. So that's what we're dealing with. And I always feel like if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And so when a student comes into my golf academy, I lay very specific rules down for, like, okay, I'm glad you're here. Can't wait to work with you. But I have rules for everybody that I work with, and you're going to have to follow them, or I'm not interested in trying to work with you, because I'm interested in long-term sustainable growth, not just this one lesson thing. I want to have a long view. And so the first rule is that we got to define our foundational pieces in every area. And even though I specialize in short game, half my lessons are full swing. And it's certainly more complicated to define foundations maybe in that area. And not everybody's foundations are the same. And that's one of the other tricky parts. Sometimes it's based on what they're physically capable of doing, right? But those are going to be defined. And if they're not, what happens is they're not sure what they're supposed to do. So when they're not getting good results, they'll tinker. They'll try a thing. They watch Golf Channel, they'll try a thing. And then all the good work you've done is unraveled and been undone. So then as a coach, once they're defined, I think it's important that that they understand what their misses mean, so they can ultimately self-coach. So it'd be like, okay, when we hit a finesse shot around the green, we're going to do these 5 things. And if it goes to the right, it's thing number 3. If you hit behind it, it's thing number 4. You're going to double down on what we've already decided is important. And if they don't understand their misses, then when you leave them alone, what you're going to do after, like I said, if you have a great student, you might see them once every 2 or 3 weeks, left to their own device, they're going to hit the self-destruct button on their forehead, which is what all golfers love to do. Even a guy like I was with Russell Henley the last 2 days up in Montreal, he was trying to hit the self-destruct button. And I'm like, nope, we're not doing this. What are our foundational pieces? And it's kind of interesting because you're around other players. He's talking to the other players and they go, well, I like to chip this way. Well, they're coming from a completely different place. So, one guy likes to draw his chips. Well, he's too steep. So, when he feels like he's drawing them, he shallows them out at high performance. Well, Russell's too shallow. So when he tried to hit a couple draws in there or whatever, he was hitting way behind the ball. So if they're not defined and they're not committed to, there's no way to sustain that growth over a long period. All right, so rule number 2 is that they got to get value from how they train. And so culturally, I create a very specific training plan for every student, and they have to follow it. And one of the things I talked about earlier is if there's not accountability to that, then they won't follow through. So there might be accountability Monday. And I see Andy there. I've done school with Andy, but Andy, you're my student, and I give you X, Y, Z to do. Next Monday, you're going to have to send me a downline video and send me a score of the game that you played. Or once again, you're not my type of guy. I'm not going to work with you. Now that sounds tough and that's difficult at a private club, but I'm at a private club. And I promise you that most players want to be coached and want to be coached hard. And when they know that's your thing, that you're not going to allow them to slide, for the most part, they love it. And the ones that don't will clearly stay away, right? Because we'll get out like, this is how this guy or girl does their business. This is the culture of the business. And so you ultimately get your type of students when you make those demands, right? And then rule number 3 is you can't play good golf if you're distracted. So that really comes to the mental side, the focus. And so we're going to dive into that in every lesson. So let me share something that I've created, a presentation I do. I teach golf level 2 and 3 at the Taos Performance Institute. And I probably showed this to you when I was at the Philadelphia section. So let's see. Tell me if somebody unmute their mic and tell me if you can see this screen right here, this slide.
Not yet, James.
All right, so what did I do wrong there?
If you hit that present now button down at the bottom of your screen and hit your entire screen, there should be able to select.
Yeah, I just selected my entire screen.
And then is there a button that says share?
Yeah, but it's not highlighted.
Okay, then click like where it says screen 1 or screen 2.
Chrome tab, window, entire screen.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. I just had to double click on it. My bad.
There we go.
All right, here we go. What's this? All right. All right. Everybody see that slide by chance?
Yes, we can.
All right. So your student A comes into your office, and there are a lot of things you have to know. And I want you to focus on the left-hand side of the screen there. You got to have knowledge on both the full swing and the short game, biomechanics, club fitting, fitness. Periodization is the ability to peak at the right time. That's if you're happen to be coaching a tournament player, that's a huge thing. Strategy, up at the President's Cup this last 2 days, you cannot believe the lengths that the players and the caddies go through on what pins are attackable, what's the wind direction, how far is the ball going at this temperature with my 8-iron, all these things. And of course, at our clubs, we are dealt with students who have a lot of times poor nutrition, poor mental performance. And you also got to learn, be adept at understanding how people learn. So you want to be a great coach. There's a lot of things you have to know, and there's no way that you can know them, right? You can't be an expert in everything. So what you really want to do is build a team of people around you that you trust that are smarter than you in these areas. So I've done that over on this right-hand side. I have different people in our industry that are super smart, smarter than me in these areas that I can lean on if I don't happen to know an answer. All right. And so ultimately, once again, you're the coach. And if you have knowledge in all these areas, that's a huge advantage, right? So I would say this, that let me stop my share. All right. Hopefully my face is back on screen, right? So an expert, somebody like Robert Yang in nutrition, if you're friends and your contemporaries, so to speak, trying to do the same thing, exact high performance out of these students, they'll tell you the most important stuff about what they know. They'll tell you the most important 20%. So if you get the most important 20% of a bunch of different people, all right, then you have this knowledge base to really help somebody, but not just like, oh, I'm going to teach them how to fold the right elbow. You got this a bigger view, a long-term view of like, this is how we're going to train. This is how we're going to prepare for a tournament. We got to change your mobility, improve your mobility. So these are the exercises you're going to do. Here's your training plan. It's written out. And there's accountabilities to this. So every Monday or every whatever, you're going to play these 3 games and send me your score. The problem, and I think the reason why coaches don't do that is it takes time and effort, and we're all busy. I got another student coming in an hour. I have the member guest next Thursday. But if we're going to be excellent at our craft, it's tough to be. You have to be good at hard things. And the reality is, the good part about it is hard, but when you're good at hard things, you get paid. And so I would challenge you all to be organized in the culture that you create. Do people just show up and you fix their swing and send them on their way, or do they get a comprehensive plan, performance plan, with, like I said, like a coach would do in any other sport, with some accountability built in and follow up? And it can't just be, oh, I'll take a lesson in a month and follow up then. I just don't think that's how it works. So I'd love to entertain a question or two about that, or about technique, or about training, or about how you more specifically develop a culture, or whatever. Somebody asked me a question. Andy asked me a question.
What does it look like when you're not working with students? So you said, it takes a lot of time. So let's say you're not face to face with somebody. What are some of the things that you're doing in your quote unquote downtime? Yeah.
So one of the things I've always done, and a lot of my students, Andy, are, they're national students. I might have a kid that's a hotshot player in Tulsa, right? And we're doing a lot of remote things or whatever, but I have a list every day of students I worked with 7 days before. Okay. It's in my planner. And then I also have a list of people that are accountable on certain days of the week. All right. So it might be a Monday, and I'll come in a half an hour early before I need to start setting up. I always block off a half an hour and just say, all right, let's see who I worked with 7 days ago. And of those, 4 students, I'll type out a text or an email like, hey, let's report in on how your training's gone this last week. All right. So that literally might take 4 or 5 minutes, but now I have 4 or 5 students that know that it wasn't like a transaction, like they gave me their money, I sent them on their way. This is a partnership. Okay. It took planning, but it took 4 minutes. All right. And then I might have a list of people that have to send me videos on a Monday or Tuesday. Usually, or I do occasionally do a Sunday. And when those either come in, I'll reply, or if they don't come in, I'll send a note like, hey, I didn't get your game scores. What's going on? So that's about a half an hour a day to create that coaching relationship, further it, and to stay true to what I believe as far as what I just said. And it's hard. Sometimes, like I got in last night at midnight. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to get up at 6:30 and do this thing. But like I said, when you're good at hard things, you get paid. So the effort, I think, is worth it. And as long as you're organized and it's more of like part of your plan, then I think, to some extent you get used to it. And it's like, this is what I do. I just show up half hour early, I knock this out, and I'm on to my teaching day. Anybody else? Any short game specific questions or performance questions?
Dave Zamaro, you raise your hand. Go ahead.
There we go. Hey, James. Thank you again for doing this. I had the privilege of meeting you down in Pinehurst for the Teacher of the Year conference, and you were awesome there. So looking forward to just hearing what you have to say. Couple questions. Number one, how many lessons do you do a day? What's the duration of your lessons? And when you're doing short game, how often are you using technology, TrackMan, any sort of that kind of stuff for short game specific lessons?
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. So when I'm teaching at my academy, it's a full day. It's probably 8 to 6, and I don't eat lunch. So there you go. I just go straight through. A handful of nuts and a water is my lunch, and I'm sure many of you are similar. So I just go. Now, one of the beliefs I told you, I think the coaching thing is broken. I just don't understand it. Come in for an hour, I'll fix you and send you on your way. So I'm lucky in that my more national reputation has allowed students to come in. I have a facility where the owner allows me to teach anybody, which is huge. And so my typical student is here for 4 or 5 hours. All right. So they'll come in, they'll do, 10 to 2 or 10 to 12. They'll eat lunch and practice, and they'll see them from 2 to 4. And I might do 2 days of it. I might have them for 8 hours. And of course, when you have somebody for a longer period of time, and you're doing that obviously because they've flown in or they've driven in, that allows you to really set the plan and have follow up. And these are the games I want you to skill development games. These are your solutions for if you see this missed. This is the foundational piece. And that's very helpful for the local people that may become an hour. It's still the structure, but the part about that is that they can come 2 weeks later, right where that other person can't. Now, as far as technology, I will use a quad or a measure, or I will use video or some technology like that, force plates, occasionally the first time. But typically I will not do it again until I catch them doing it right. So it's like when they're really going well, I learned this from Greg Rose at TPI. It's like when you're at your peak, when you're doing your best, let's measure what you're doing and quantify it so that if you ever get off later, we can go back to it and say, look at the pressure in your right foot at 9 o'clock in the backswing, and look at it now. Right. So I really feel like that's a better use for me of technologies. Like when they're really going right, I want to put a check mark in the calendar and say, okay, this is your blueprint, so to speak. And the problem with that, of course, bodies change over time, and maybe they got a tight hip and they can't do that anymore. But typically, that's the way I use it.
We had a question come in from Roger via text. He asked what your process is for curing the yips.
Okay, so if you have a true neural focal dystonia, you're not curing it yip. It's unsolvable. All right. So we got to figure out if it's neurological or if it's performance anxiety. And the reality is, I would say 90% of the time, in my opinion, it's performance anxiety, which is very curable. Let's assume that's the case. All right. If it's not the case, let's say someone's got a true neural problem, you got to flip them around left-handed, or you got to do something they've never done before. Because if it's anywhere near the same motor program, the neural damage will not allow them to move. Okay, so let's assume that they can. Most people that have a real neural problem, they can't chip on the chipping green, or they can't chip when they play. People that have performance anxiety chip pretty good when they practice, and then they can't chip at all or putt at all, or drive it. You see it all. All right, so let's assume that it's performance anxiety that creates this stress response movement. All right. The first, you got to start with the genesis. It's because the physics are bad. And at some point, they've been embarrassed by their missing a 1-foot putt, or they've been embarrassed because they double hit a chip in front of 30 people or whatever. And that's psychological. Your subconscious is scanning the environment, and it's trying to keep you away from dangerous situations. That's its role. So it recognizes this problem, and it says, no, you need to avoid this, and you need to wait in there and do it anyway. And that obviously, the stress ruins the fluidity of the movement and whatnot. So you got to have a two-pronged approach. And the first one, the physics comes first, in my opinion. You have to say, okay, when you yip, or when you hit your 4 inches behind the ball, this is what happens. To counteract that movement, we need to feel all right. So let's say, for example, I'm not going to share my screen. I'm going to stand up. Hopefully y'all can see me. So this is very common. So people that yip, a lot of times they'll get in the transition. Let's say I'm chipping. All right. So they get in the transition, and they have a quick change of direction. They'll dive their knees, and they narrow the radius of their circle, and they dig a trench. So you might say the opposite of that would be quieter legs in the transition, and then a movement where you extend your chest, where your chest lifts so that your arms can move through, and that there would be freedom in the rotation. Okay, and I always suggest to you that, even though that's not widely taught, that 99 out of 100 of the best players in the world do that. They lift when they extend their chest as they rotate. All right, so it's slight, and I can show you a video of that. I can show you the screen if you're doubting. So, okay, so I have an awareness that I get in this environment, the stressful environment. I'm going to have to double down on quieting my legs and lifting my chest. That's step one. That helps. Okay. Then you got to, like I said, you got to be wear many hats when you coach. And so I had that list pulled up, and one of them was you got to be a sports psychologist to some extent, or what my good friend Joe Hallett would call a crisis manager. People that they're freaking out all the time. And so there are strategies. My favorite one is actually humming. Your part of your brain, your cerebral cortex, is in charge of going, hey, this is a bad place for you to be. You should not be here. You should not be hitting this chip shot. You're going to embarrass yourself again. You need to distract that. And there are a lot of ways to do that. I know people that count backwards. I know people that, hum. There are other strategies, affirmations and whatnot. You can reframe the environment. So I actually wrote a book on this. It's called Cool Under Pressure. It's available on Amazon. I wrote it with a guy in your area, actually, Dr. Randall Stutman, who's a member at Aronimink, who has a performance business called Admired Leadership. So we did a book together. So anyway, so you find I don't want to say cure, you find the opposite of what happens when they're under stress. You key in on that, and then you got to coach them up from a mental perspective. If you want to hum, there's an app called Swing Sound Golf that has both the full swing, tempo, and short game. It's a trumpet noise. It makes a sound in the backswing and a sound through, and you can set it at different speeds. And the reality is, people that, like I said, if I'm humming backswing, they're creating kind of an auditory cue for me to swing. A lot of times that takes care of it. It's kind of strange, but good question. It's a tough thing to cure, but that's kind of my average student. They fly in, they go, if you can't teach me to chip it on the green, I'm going to quit. So I have a lot of experience dealing with that, but and not 100% success rate for sure. It's hard, but some successes for sure.
Yeah, I actually used a metronome the other day, and I usually use it for putting, and I used it for the chipping, and that actually did work, to your point of the humming.
Yeah, and the first book I wrote called Your Short Game Solution, I talk about how Charlie Wee used to count when he chipped, and he didn't have yips, but it calmed his brain because it gave that part of his brain something to do. So he would say 1 in the backswing, he'd say and, like a little pause or breath there, and then 2. So 1 and 2, and he did that on every chip, and he had under stress, had opportunity to win the Players Championship under stress. He's counting 1 and 2. A lot of people think, well, what are good players thinking about? It's like, probably not what you think they're thinking about. They're doing, they're trying to talk themselves into it just like you are. So.
Jamie asked, what are your few favorite challenges and games to give players for practice time when they're away from you?
What, give me a category. Bunker, putting, chipping, what?
Start with bunkers.
All right. So the big mistake people make in the bunker is they go in there and they put the ball in the bottom of the bunker in the flat lie, and they hit like 10 in a row, right? And if you read any of my stuff or heard any of my stuff, that type of training is nearly worthless. And then you get a false sense of competency and a false sense of confidence from that, because they all look by the pin. Maybe you miss hit 1 and you got 9 right up there. But on the first hole, you got 1 foot in the bunker and 1 foot out, and you don't know what to do, right? So what I do is I give them a game called knockout. And what you're going to do is you're going to pick a pin in the middle of the green. And every bunker, typically, not everyone, but most bunkers are, high on the sides and in the front and lower in the middle. And so you're going to create 6 lies, and you're going to hit from this lie until you hit a ball, typically inside 8 feet. Okay, 8 feet is tour average. So let's say I have my normal flat lie in the bunker, and I do it on the first try. That lie condition is knocked out. Now I got to go to the 5 other lie conditions. I'm going to do upslope. I do that on the first try, right? My score is 2 so far. I go to a downslope. I'm trying to hit this off the downslope to that same pin inside 8 feet. It takes me 5 tries to do it. So far I got 7. Then I go buried, ball above my feet and ball below my feet. So there's all your lie conditions, and your score is a number of balls it takes you to hit a shot, a bunker shot, to 8 feet or less. So what would I know after those? Let's say I score at 12. I do on the first or second try in every lie condition except the downhill. Well, what do I need to do? I need to practice the downhill. I need to probably steepen the angle a little bit somehow, or whatever the case may be. So that type of design in a training program would basically mandate that people practice the way, they're doing hard problems that are going to actually help them when they play golf, as opposed to what people do, which is just to, find a shot that they're comfortable with and just hit it over and over again. I got another one. Let me share another one because you just said what game. So y'all have a hot shot 14-year-old at your club that chips with their lob wedge and they won't chip with any other club, right? So I get that a lot. And so you could, as an old guy, go, you know what, there's value in you occasionally using a pitching wedge, and they would just look at you like you're an old guy. So what I'll do is I will design a game and say, okay, we're going to play 4 clubs to 4 feet or less. And I'll pick a spot on the short game area. And I said, you can start with whatever club you want to. And they'll go, I'll start with my lob wedge. And I said, we're going to just hit from here until you hit a ball to 4 feet or less. And we're going to count how many balls it takes you. All right. So let's say they hit their lob wedge. And let's say they hit a great shot. They hit it in there 3 feet away. I said, all right, now you got your sand wedge. Now when they have their sand wedge out, they have to obviously see a different trajectory and a different landing spot and a different rollout. And let's say it takes them 3 tries to get it in there. Okay. Now they're going to use their pitching wedge and there's no place to land it. Maybe there's a hump in the way and they struggle, and it's takes them 10 shots to get it to 4 feet or less. Okay. Then you give them an 8-iron and they can roll it right up the hill, and they do it on their first try. And you might say, okay, so you scored a 14 in this game. What club was the easiest? And they might go lob wedge. I'm like, great. Okay, what club was the second easiest? And they go 8-iron. Yet they've never practiced 8-iron, but they told me 8-iron was the second easiest, not me telling them, right? And I said, what club shouldn't you use? Well, it was the pitching wedge. I had nowhere to land it. Okay, so now you go to a different place, different hole. You do it again. At this time, they might go, well, what club was the easiest? They might go, well, it was a pitching wedge. And so when you design a skill development game like that, the best learning happens is when you have self-learning. When they're discovering that pitching wedge is the easiest club in this situation versus me telling them what it is, right? So I just design a game. How about you play this and tell me what you learned? So if you want to get rid of that kid only using a 60-degree wedge, just get them on a little upslope, put them into the grain, give them some green to work with, let them hit their lob wedge, make them hit it till they get it inside 4 feet. And then you let them do it with a pitching wedge or an 8-iron, and they'll learn very quickly that there's a better play than lob wedge, right? So that's the type of stuff that we all should be doing. And then, like I said, I like to have accountability. If that kid, if I don't see him for a month, he's going to go use his lob wedge every time. So I'll say, hey, listen, it's important to me that you have 3 clubs in your hand every time you go over to practice your finesse game or whatever. And then I want you to text me your score of your 4 clubs to 4 feet every Monday. And I'm going to make him do it. And if he doesn't do it, then he can take a lesson from the assistant in this pro shop or whatever. So that's kind of how I would structure it. But that's a very good question.
Go for it, Eric.
James, thanks so much for all this. You mentioned early on that you have some foundations for particular parts of the game. Let's just pick pitching. Would you mind sharing some of the foundations that you have?
Would pitching be a higher 10-yard shot over a bunker, or would pitching be like a flighted 70-yard, what I call distance wedge?
Can we go something in between, like 30 yard kind of shot, 20 to 30 yard shot?
All right, so it's kind of a stock 30-yarder, okay?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to share my screen again. Let's see. I just got to remember how to do that. Boom. All right, let's see here. I can go up. I could do that, but it'd be clearer to just do the same presentation. All right, so you come into my office and you don't have any idea what you're supposed to do because everybody's got a different opinion, right? And so you've heard 26 different things. And it doesn't matter to me if it's a 10-yard carry or a 40-yard carry. This is what I want you to do. I want you, this is Tom Panisse, I want you to set up open with your chest. Now, it's helpful, in my opinion, to be a little open with your feet if you want your chest open, but that's not a deal breaker. Like I said, I get I got a guy on Lives, Scotty Vincent, likes to put his feet closed, stork, but open his chest. That's fine. I want the handle leading forward with the face matching. That's really, really, really important. And hopefully you can see at the bottom there of Tom Pernice, when he sets that club down, that the face is kind of lined up with it there. All right. A lot of people lean the handle forward and then hood the club face or point the face directly at the pin, which is something you never see a tour player do. I want a neutral path with the face open to the path. So there we go. That means the right elbow's got to fold and the handle and the club are going to work on a straight line of the pin. I believe there's an optimal sequence. This would be on the right, a sequence of a shot, let's say 45 yards or less in the air. And that is at the start of the downswing that the club is the one that accelerates the fastest, which makes the chest and arm flip. So typically the blue would be on top of the green, you know, and it flips because the club decelerates the arm. All right. So I think that the club should release and return to the same angle that you set it up on. So if we can measure that. So there's 5 degrees of shaft lean at address. There's 5 degrees of shaft lean at impact. Now that's obviously front of the ball instead of back. So we can measure, and if it's handles going back, there's a little bit of a decel of the lead arm or the chest. And if it's forward, then he's kind of driving his legs and probably pulling the handle a little bit. And then lastly, whether it's through pressures in your feet or movement in your chest or head, I think the energy always flows the direction of the pin. So those are the foundational things that I believe in, irregardless of the distance. And I would say, let me show you 2 videos. One of Tom Pernice doing it. All right. Now, granted, that's not 30. That's probably 10 or 15. All right. And you say, well, he's doing what you taught him, which is true. But I don't teach Steve Stricker, never have. He just does it. So there's his open stance. He's going to one hop this. It's probably a 20-yarder. One hop it just left of this pin, and it's over at the players, back of the range at the players. So let's see. So face isn't quite as rotated open, but that's okay. Kind of up the plane through the hands. And there's the finesse sequence. I'll do one more and talk about that, I guess. And now his arms and chest are rotating at the same speed through the bottom of the ball, and the weight's flowing into his lead foot. So to me, there's style choices. Steve Stricker does not hinge his wrist. He levers his elbow. And Tom Pernice does it more with his wrists, right? So so there's room for that sort of thing, individuality, but I think under the hood, they're all kind of doing the same thing. Now, let me just add one thing to that, and then I'll stop sharing so you can let me know if you feel like that is understandable or not. I want you to look at the seam on his pant leg in his pocket, okay? You know, if I go back to this earlier graph where I put a kinematic sequence of a power swing of basically a 70-yard shot or a 270-yard shot to one of a 30-yard shot or a 10-yard shot here on the right, that the unwinding happens basically from the ground up, that the pelvis accelerates in the firing order first and faster than anything else, okay? And then in the finesse sequence, it's much, much slower. So if I go back to Steve and we're playing this video, I want you to watch the seam of his pants at the start of his downswing, okay? So there's just a marginal amount of hip turn there. All right, now I'm going to pause. And as the club comes down, I'm sorry about the quality of the video. It's an old one. Watch his pant leg and you tell me what happens. Anybody? Hopefully that you're saying nothing. Yeah, nothing. Well, that's not how you hit a 70-yard shot. That's not how you hit a 270-yard shot. You know, So there comes a point where the club goes first. The arms and the chest now are going to move, accelerate and decelerate exactly the same speed. They're riding together. And I'm going to play it one more time. It didn't work so good. So the club goes. Now watch how his chin is lifting. He's getting taller and making room for the angles to come out and rotate. So those to me are foundational, and I have that in the bunker. I have it putting. I have it in a distance wedge. And what I've done, let's see, stop sharing. Let's see. There we go. I think I'm back. And it's not easy. We talked about this, but I've written it out. And I have a notebook that I've given every student that's come into my office. It's going to be a serious student. It's about 40 pages long of like, these are the foundations. These are how you train. These are the mental attributes you're going to need to have if you want to be a great player. Here you go. It's our blueprint for what we're going to do. You know, culturally, here it is. And every time you take a lesson, I want you to bring the book with you, and we're going to just, keep writing in it and keep evolving. So to me, that's what I mean when I say culture. If it's not defined, then that student comes in and he goes, well, I want to chip like, somebody that I saw on TV that you feel like is not doing it properly, or properly is the wrong word, but there's maybe a way to do it that would lead to higher performance, more control, more repeatability, whatnot. And so if you leave them to their own device, then they'll, like I said, they'll hit that self-destruct button. I did see a couple other questions. Yeah, I like this. Keep going.
Go for it, Andy.
All right. So we'll say last 5 or 10 years, has anything come up that was like an aha moment, that was something that maybe you were teaching a certain way and you found out some new information and you had to kind of change some of the things you did based on this new piece of information that you've received? Anything, 5, 10 years, whatever.
Yeah, no, actually none. And that's been amazing to me. I did learn something the other day. I was at TPI that made me scratch my head and wonder, but I've never really talked about it or had to change it. So one of the things I've always talked about in finesse, Andy, is how the pressure flows towards the pin. And so how in the backswing, as your shoulder goes down, the weight increases in the lead foot, and how as your chest is rotating towards the pin and over your lead side, that pushes more pressure in your lead foot, and how good players lift and rotate. All right. So the pressure always goes up and forward. So I've been teaching that for 25 years, and it's clearly obvious. But if you're looking at center of mass in a 10 and 20 yard shot, the best players, the center of mass also goes up in the backswing. And I'm like, what do you mean it goes up in the backswing? So I was at TPI the other day. And they go, yeah, we've measured the center of mass in the backswing. And I'm like, I'm not sure I understand, but somehow the center of mass is raising here, and it never goes back down. It raises even more through. So I'm constantly learning things, sometimes self-discovery, and sometimes by hanging around people that are smarter than me, which is what everybody ought to be doing. Find some people that are smarter than you in a certain area and figure out what they're doing. So I'm learning new things all the time, but I have never come across something that has made me change what I've been doing really for the last 25 years yet. I'm certainly open to it. I just want to be good at my job. I don't need to be right. But I haven't really come across anything. If anything, it's been validated to some extent. I did see an article the other day, the new way to hit bunker shots. Don't line up left, line up square, extend the wrist, throw the club. I'm like, wait a minute, new way? It's like I've been teaching this for 30 years. What do you mean? And Seve was doing it in 1977. You know what I'm saying? So, but whatever. All right. I did see one other question come across the screen, and I apologize, I don't remember the name. Somebody asked, how do you modify the games for different skill levels? And that's exactly what you do. So the sweet spot for learning happens about 6 beyond what a student is currently capable of. So let's say I got a student that's not capable of even hitting a bunker shot on the green consistently. You know, it doesn't do me any good to say you got to hit it to 8 feet or less, right? Their score on this game is, 150. That does nobody any good. So yeah, you would create plateau levels of performance. Say, okay, we still have to practice different lies. You still have to put that player on a downslope because that's what's going to happen on the course. But you might just say, hey, winning scores, if you get the ball on the green, that counts, right? And so as they improve, you make the game more challenging. And so you got to constantly monitor that improvement. Now, I'll say this, if you're not keeping score, how would you know if they're getting better or not? They tell you, yeah, hey, I'm getting better, coach. It's like, well, how much better? It's like, well, I don't know, feels better. So that's one reason why we do game scores. If I had a knockout game in the bunker where we do all 6 lies, and instead of inside 8 feet, they just got to get the ball on the green and say, hey, send me your score on Monday. And they said, my score is 8. I'm like, oh, amazing. All right, let's get it to 15 feet or less now. And then the next week they send me a score of 12. I was like, okay, this is more appropriate. I want them to struggle a little bit, and you want your students to struggle a little bit. That's where the growth happens, and kind of fighting for that next level. Like I said, 6% beyond what I'm currently doing, and that needs to continue to move up, and hopefully never be quite satisfied with what you have. So, all right, I saw another one go up there.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Hey everyone, James, good to be on with you guys, and everyone, appreciate you guys all doing this. Just a question, James. So we talked about kind of influences, finding like people to latch on to and learn from. Who are some of your influential people in your career? Like a Mac O'Grady or a Phil Rogers, maybe from yesteryear?
It's a great question. I sometimes you learn what you want or what you believe in, what you teach by being around people that you don't like what they're teaching. I had that experience at the beginning, honestly. And I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus. I'm not going to name a name, but I'm like, this is BS. We're not helping students. I'm going to not do it this way. So that points me. So it doesn't always have to be somebody that's amazing. What really needs to be is you need to be willing to step outside of your little area and engage and watch other people teach or talk to other coaches. And so, honestly, when I've learned I'm a good observer. I've just learned things from watching other people. And when you're teaching on tour, the good news is there's always coaches out there, and they're always usually really good coaches. And so you can just ask them questions like, hey, I'm struggling with this. What do you see, or what would you do if? And so I've had some of that. But I would say in the last 15 years, it would probably be Greg Rose. Greg Rose is at Taz Performance Institute has taught me so many cool things. Like I've just mentioned, how the center of mass goes up in the backswing, and he's asking me, well, why is this? I'm like, dang, I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about this, and I'm gonna have to start looking at players and try and figure out why this happens, if this is a common thing. But they challenge you. But I would say Peter Mackay from a biomechanics standpoint, Robert Yang from a nutrition standpoint, Mark Verstegen from a fitness standpoint. These people are so smart. They're training NFL athletes, they're training all these people, and they train golfers. And so the other would be players. When I'm with a PGA Tour player, a lot of times, like say, for example, I was Ben Martin last year. I'm like, hey, Ben, when things start to really unravel, and your brain's going a million miles an hour and you're playing bad, what do you do to pull yourself back in the moment, to kind of reboot? And so this is what I do. When somebody that has that experience will share with you, that is huge. And so I would say Tom Pernice has shared a lot with me. People like Ben Martin. I'm learning some interesting things from coaching Russell Henley. Russell Henley said the other day, or was it the PGA Championship? You know why I don't like ever had a coach? I'm like, why? Why I don't like having a coach? Like, why do you not like having a coach, Russell? He says, sometimes I hit a bad shot just because I was thinking about a cheeseburger. And he said, coaches have to comment after every bad shot. I'm like, okay, I've learned to keep my mouth shut, right? So the reality is, players, if you listen to them, or other coaches will tell you things that, yeah, you know, you're right. I'm going to fold that into my game, so to speak. So good question, though.
Go for it, Jeff.
Hey, James, you have a couple of decades of obviously great work and under your belt, but there's some younger coaches here, and I love the fact that you have that verbal contract of culture and engagement with your players. But maybe talk a little bit to the younger coaches about when you have to fire a player, maybe it's a short-term loss for a long-term gain as far as what your overall culture is going to be and how you're going to control your space.
Right. Thank you, Jeffrey. I will say this, that you can't fire a student. Basically, here's the thing. If you have a student that's non-performing, you're a young teacher, whatever, you cannot blame the student. It's always your fault. There's a good book, Jocko Willink. There are no bad teams, only bad leaders. The reality is, at the beginning, if you don't lay down the rules, this is the way we do things, you can't later go, I'm not happy with the way you're doing things, and this isn't working out. For either of us, you need to find somebody that can help you better than me, right? So the reality is, the key to that is in the beginning, say, I know you have expectations. I know you have hopes of what this relationship is going to bring, but I also have them because I want to do a good job. These are the things I require. If that doesn't come first, Jeffrey, there's no way later you can say, hey, things aren't working out, because it's your fault, right? So that comes first. And then if you're not following up, then it's also your fault. And so if you're doing those things and then they won't play along, then you go, hey, clearly I'm asking things that you're not comfortable with. This isn't working out. It's gonna be better for you if you work with so-and-so or whatever. So I think communication to that is really important. And it's doubly important in a private club when the members have a little bit of hold over you, right? So the communication tool up front, but if you're honest and say, this is what I found works, and if we're really going to get better in this partnership, this is how it's got to go, then you have some recourse later when it doesn't work out that way. Jeffrey, I hope that answered your question. I don't know if that would answer it or not, but try it. Anybody else? All right, let's see. I'm not just going to pop off. I'll leave with one other little thing. Let's see. Let's talk about an interesting topic, which is learning. What learning is, and I have a pet peeve in that I think a lot of teachers, like I said with Russell Leslie, they comment after every bad shot. That's not what learning is. You, as a coach, reading a TrackMan and say, hey, the path was 5 to the right, face was closed, you took it inside, or whatever. That's not learning either. Learning needs to be introspective, an introspective thing from the student. So you're much better off asking questions. And if they can't answer them, then that's a problem, because like I said, they're going to leave in a minute and they got to ask the question themselves and answer it. So one of the things I constantly am trying to do as a coach is teach my students how to self-coach, how to be out on their own, experience an event, and then instead of hitting the self-destruct button on their forehead, they're going, hey, that's curious. Wonder why that ball went to the right. Is it path or was it face? I always get this in chipping. It's like they chip a ball way out to the right. They hit behind one, they skull the next. I'm like, hey, why do you think that ball's going to the right? They go, the face is open. And I'm like, try another guess. Any other guess will do. And if they can't at some point answer, then they can't go out on their own later and do well. So I like to show this slide when I do presentations, and I'm sure I showed it in your section a decade ago when I was there, but let me try and share one more time here. This is an interesting story. So prior to one of the Olympics, I ran into Michael Phelps's swimming coach. Let's see. And they were talking about technology and how they're trying to get Michael Phelps to change his butterfly stroke. Now you got to think that Michael Phelps has been doing the same butterfly stroke since he's probably 9 years old. And here he is a year before the Olympics, and they want him to change it. So off topic, but that's the notebook I give. There's, culturally, there's science, they get everything they want. All right, this is the one I wanted to show. So this is the range at Riviera. And Charlie's trying to learn a new foot pattern in his golf swing, his wedge game to some extent too, his distance wedge game. And so what these people did is they videoed the new movement in practice, and it plays 30 times over slow motion. And he's got these virtual reality goggles. He's got his phone in these classes, and there's two images, one on each side, right eye, left eye, and they do some sort of weird thing, and they blur into one image. And then they created music. We talked about how counting or humming can distract the cerebral cortex if you happen to have the yips or whatnot. But when music played along with the movement, it makes the neural connections myelinate stronger. It makes them connect better. So later on, when you have to pull the movement out of long-term memory, it's there. So what happens is you play it 30 times, the music's going, the image goes black. Now, when the image goes black, obviously the phone turns off. There's an after image in the screen, basically in your retina. And the music continues to play. Then the music stops, and then Charlie would mimic the movement. All right. Now, the question I would have for you would be this. Let's see. If your view of coaching is my student's going to come and then I'm just going to tell them what they're doing wrong, and then they're going to walk out the door, and then I won't see them for a month, and they're going to do exactly what I told them to do. Then you're not going to be a good coach, because they're not doing that. If you have a much bigger view of like, wow, learning and executing is so much broader than that. And as a coach, I have to dive deeply into everything that affects performance, and none of that, but like, if this needs to be done quickly, what cues can I give the person, or exercise can I give the person, as opposed to just words? Then you'd be coaching completely differently than we've done it for years, right? So, like I said, there's a lot of smart people in a lot of areas, and a lot of them are other coaches. They might be swim coaches, like Michael Phelps's coaches, that learned that this was a more efficient way for Michael to change his stroke. And one of the things I admitted, 1996, a product called the Speed Stick, and there's a pole that had a gauge in the middle. It's still own it, and a lot of people have kind of licensed it for a bit, and a lot of people basically have stole it, but that's okay. And one of the reasons why I did that is because I was with Adam Schreiber, who's a great coach that coached Anthony Kim, that worked for David Ledbetter, and he told me something interesting in passing. He said, I found that you can change a swing more quickly in the gym than you can on a range, because the minute you put a club and a ball in their hand, they're going to do what they've always done. And if you really want to change a motor pattern, you should take the club away and the ball away. And that got me thinking, like, yeah, wouldn't it be good to learn how to swing instead of like hit the ball? And so that comment was the impetus for this product. And it's really that type of stuff. You just got to be curious as a coach. I mean, you got to think about how people learn most efficiently. And a lot of times, verbal cues are like the least effective way to teach, the least effective way to learn. So, and I'm sure you know this, like if you said, hey, you're coming over the top, and so what happens, your right shoulder's internally rotated and the right arm gets high and the club gets steep, and then you're outside the plane, and you got some insurance salesman trying to figure out what you're saying. Where if you said, hey, grab this Frisbee, and as you shift, turn the Frisbee this way. And then I'm going to put a tee right behind the ball, just a little outside. Then once you turn the Frisbee, miss the tee. Well, miss the tee is a lot better coaching than talking about internally rotating your trail arm. It's just easier for the student, right? So one of the challenges you have to have as a young coach is to learn these little tricks or cues to get your students to actually do what you want them to do, which that's not the hard part. Like, we all kind of know what looks right and what's going to help the physics. It's like getting them to actually do it is the hard part. And so that's where the challenge would lie for you all. I mean, people that have been in the industry for 20 years have their little tricks, but ones that have been in there for 2 or 3 don't. And that's one reason why we need to mentor, obviously, as older coaches to the young people. Did any of that make sense at all? Did it? Okay, who knows? All right. Matt, I'll give him a chance to ask another question or two, and if not, I'll pop off.
Yeah, that works for us. Last call for questions, everybody.
Putting questions, performance questions, how to prepare for a tournament, how to prepare, get a young person to prepare for a yardage book, all these things as a coach you should be doing. All right. Well, we'll call that good enough then, Matt.
Thank you very much for your time, James. It was very informative.
All right.
James, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. It was great having you out here in person a bunch of years back, but really appreciate you taking the time today. I know you're super busy, but everybody really appreciates the knowledge and the time, my friend. So
I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody on there trying to get better at their craft. It's something we all should be doing every day, including moi. So, all right. Thank you.
thanks,
Thank
James.
you.
Take care, bud. Thanks, everyone.